I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the Firehouse Building Committee meeting, October 23rd, 2023, 6 p.m., and we're meeting in the Harvey hearing room. This is being broadcast live on WCAT and is being recorded and will be on YouTube within probably 48 hours. Roll call, Council President Lettieri.
Yes.
Myself, Chief Wiley, Karen Chavez.
Here.
Chris Boyce.
Here.
Josh Castellano.
Here.
Tom Trudina.
Here.
Kim Dimes.
Here.
Jill Dorr.
Here.
Paul Flanagan. Larry Powers.
Here.
Jonathan DeMoro.
Here.
Hannah Belcher.
Here.
Town Manager Marino. Charles Flanagan.
Here.
And our honorary member, Richard Banks.
Present.
Glad to be here, Mr. Banks.
Don't believe it.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we'd like to call the public hearing to order. This is our opportunity, again, to hear from you and answer any questions or comments that you may have. If you would just, for the record, stand up, state your name and precinct, or name and address. And with that, would anyone like to be heard? Sir.
My name is Robert Massa, and I live in Precinct 3, Grandview Avenue, 1 Point Shirley. You probably already answered these questions, but I'd like to throw them out there. First of all, being down Point Shirley, which is really part of Winthrop, I know sometimes it's not considered that way, but anyhow, I'm concerned about not having the station down on Shirley Street because of the distance that now has been added to the route to get to Point Shirley. I mean, we don't have a straight mile in this whole town without curves or stop signs or whatever. And so every single item you put in front of a fire engine to get there, it's gonna slow it down. So the issue is then why not have made, and maybe you already went through this, why not have rebuilt the stations that are there? I agree they're too old, they should be replaced, but why not tear them down and replace them? And if you need more room, take the adjacent properties to both stations to give you more room for whatever capacity you need, instead of taking two prime, when I say prime, probably higher taxed properties in the town than the adjacent properties to the existing fire stations. And maybe you've already figured that out, I don't know.
One of the things that we adhere to and one of the standards that we use is NFPA 1710. That dictates how professional fire departments, there are call fire departments, there are call vol fire departments, there are professional fire departments. We're considered a professional fire department. It's also considered, because of the density of the town of Winthrop, we're considered an urban fire department, not a suburban fire department. We have 19,000 people in 1.6 square miles. NFPA 1710 says that from the time of alarm to the time of arrival, we have to get to your house in less than 5 minutes and 20 seconds, 90% of the time. Now granted, I will admit, there will be a slight increase in our response time, but I promise you, we have done this, we have timed this. We can get anywhere in this town in well under 5 minutes and 20 seconds. So that puts us within the NFPA standards. Now, a lot of times, I don't have the actual number, but frequently, multiple times a day, we have multiple calls. So there are numerous times when Engine 2 from Pauline Street is the first responding engine to Point Shirley. And that's even, albeit around the corner, a slightly longer distance. The Shirley Street station, as far as increasing the footprint for the Shirley Street station, there is really nowhere to increase that footprint because they just developed, there's a brand new development on one side and there's a street on the other corner.
What about going up Ocean Ave?
In theory, you could, but you would have to go back multiple properties, because you'd have to push the apparatus bay back off the street. It has to be, the way we come out of the station right now, we're immediately on the sidewalk. As soon as we pull out the door, we're on the sidewalk. That's in violation of today's standards, modern NFPA standards, it would have to be pushed back from the street at least, probably close to 100 feet, which would put us at least one house, if not two houses, up Ocean Ave. And those would be, in essence, hostile takings. And it would have to be completely raised. You couldn't, when I mean raised, demolished. You could not rebuild that building to current standards.
No, I understand that perfectly, that they're so old that you'd have to demolish them. But you could do it one at a time, and regardless of what, the cost has gotta be less than what you're anticipating for this. And this is not gonna be where you think it's gonna be anyhow, because it always goes over.
Either one of those two projects would require multiple land takings, multiples, not two pieces of property like this project is. It would be 2 or 3 pieces of property for each building, which could be 5 or 6, which at that point, they may be hostile takings. And if they're hostile takings, they're extremely time-consuming and could take years, adding significant cost to the project.
So these people have already agreed, so that made it easy.
It's
That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and the chief just talked about the Shirley Street station. I'll just say, we did look at doing exactly what you said at the current Pauline Street station. To make that one, again, it would have been one central station, but it would have included having 7 to 9 takings of property. Yeah, 4 of them would have been single-family homes.
Well,
And that's,
are you
again, just.
required now to make these stations that much bigger because of the codes?
Yes.
Is that what's
Yes.
driving
The
this
biggest thing is a
large
piece of,
property
so the
that you're
biggest
taking?
piece of equipment, so say the ladder truck, which is what, 45, 50, 42
42
feet.
feet long.
It's supposed to be able to come out of the building and sit on the apron of the footprint of the building without touching the sidewalk, right? So that sets it back, whatever, 100 feet, 90 feet, which goes into the takings. The current stations now, I think Shirley Street is maybe 7,000 square feet, and I think this one is 7,500 or whatever it is square feet. The new proposed one is 35,000 square feet. Now, it also includes, which we don't have now, is bays for ambulance service and also bays for auxiliary equipment. And it also houses the health department, right? So it definitely performs a few more functions. As far as the takings, like the chief said, that the hostile takings would require more time because it would have to go through a court proceeding. Still could be done. And when you talked about the cost and how everything, which seems to be nowadays, right, everything's always higher than expected. The project cost that we're anticipating here, including acquisition cost, demolition cost, relocation cost for businesses, is all included. And those prices, the prices that were given to us, is effective of summer of next year. So it's not, you know what I mean? So they're anticipating it probably a little higher than it is today, but those costs are good for June of 2024. And what they've told us, and if you look at other buildings around the area, it goes up between 8 and 10% a year. So the cost, and we do have, like I said, we didn't do the Shirley Street station because we just didn't think it was feasible, but we did do exactly what you were talking about at Pauline Street, and the cost was the same. It wasn't any more or less. Now, the takings would have been, again, since there were so many of them, they would have been costly as well. So, just trying to answer.
Okay.
Chief, is there not also an efficiency with a single station?
There is. It's much more efficient for us to operate out of a single station than it is for multiple stations. And for the residents of Point Shirley, historically, any time that we've had forewarning of a storm or anything of that nature, we always man Point Shirley. We put fire, EMS, and police down there. And now, with the new high water vehicle that we just acquired, it makes it a lot easier for us to get to and from the point.
Scott, can I make one point?
Sure.
The reason there is a beach station is because it was built for horses. Okay, when those boat stations were built, the apparatus was.
No, I understand
And
that. I just-
that was the time that
it
had to be
seems like
made
you're
up.
taking a huge amount of land, that you could take less land, but you're saying no, at the stations where they are.
Well, some of the specialized things that fall under OSHA now and things like that, you'd have to do it twice. They're very expensive, and you'd have to, like, airlock, clean room for your gear, all these different things that are mandates. They're not, we're grandfathered right now because we have these old buildings. the things you're gonna have to do, you'd have to clone those in both buildings, which means the initial cost for some of that stuff would be doubled. And it's not just simply having a big garage to back apparatus in and a place for the firefighters to sleep. There's some really strict guidelines now based on health regulations and other things that have to be in the building. And you'd have to do it twice if you did both buildings. And some of the stuff to make that happen isn't like we get two small ones. There's one system that does it, and you'd have to do it in both buildings.
Ma'am?
Which one, me?
Oh, yes.
Hi, Carol Beach, Precinct 2. So I'm in favor for the firehouse, you know, up here in these buildings. But he brings up a good point. I read something that Cambridge is updating, like 7 or 8 of their old 1900 fire stations and bringing them up to code at the cost of, you know, between 5 and 7 million per building. Is there a way, or have we thought about doing this project and also maybe keeping the Shirley Street station and just doing the upgrades? Or once you do an upgrade, do you need 100-foot?
They're not, these buildings are not capable of being brought up to modern standards. They're not. Most of the buildings that you see renovated were buildings that were built maybe I'll go as far back as the 1920s or even 30s. But there were motorized, mechanized fire apparatus that went out of there. These stations are so old and so outdated. They're built in the 1880s. It can't possibly be built to standards. We can't get apparatus to fit inside. We have to custom order our apparatus to fit inside the station. When out-of-town covering companies come in, they can't go inside our stations. Their apparatus won't fit. And it can't be, we can't lower the floor. We
Right,
can't
right.
raise the steel because the second floor is on there. The only thing you could do would be to take the third floors off the buildings and raise everything up. And at that point, we're still on top of the sidewalk, and we've still got
You haven't really
you know,
changed anything.
we don't have, we're in the process right now, we have our first female firefighter in 25 years at the fire academy. She's due to graduate in another month and a half, maybe 2 months. We don't have any separate facilities for her, nothing.
Right.
It's, everybody's the same. These buildings, 50 years ago, we have studies that say that 60 years ago, that these buildings had outlived their usefulness and needed to be replaced.
Yep.
Ma'am?
Sarah Kelsey, I'm precinct 6. I was interested in some clarity on the ballot question. It feels confusing, because I was at the last meeting here where people were like, we're voting on this, and so I'm just, it seems unclear what a yes vote is for and what a no vote is for. And you,
Sure. A yes vote for this question, for the firehouse question, a yes vote is to agree with a debt exclusion to build a new firehouse at that location.
okay,
A no vote is not to do that.
okay.
Was there any specific? I have had questions about people asking if a yes vote was just to build it, but not necessarily the location, but no.
I'm feeling like the location is part of the vote, because the
Yes.
address is in the question,
Yes.
but then it goes on to really just talk about the taxes and the rate, so it could be, perceived as like, oh, yes, I'd like to get those breaks, we don't wanna pay the extra, like, we want the breaks, but people could think that they're voting just for the tax break or not, and not the location also.
Yeah, bond counsel went through multiple iterations of the question. It's very specific as to what you can say and what you can't say on it, which is why we tried to do some sort of an explanation under it.
Yeah.
But it is all-inclusive. It's not this plus some extra cost later. It's an all-inclusive cost. For example, the town of Stoneham did a ballot question right in the middle of, or right prior to COVID for a school building. And it was, whatever, it was a high school, and it was about $280 million, and it passed. With the cost of everything after COVID and everything going on, with supply chain issues and such, the cost went up. So they literally had to go back out and get an additional vote to cover the cost of the increase.
But the no vote in this case means like, no to this whole idea, try again.
Means you're basically back to square one, right?
Thank you.
Sir?
Todd Sagal, Precinct 2. I had heard something about the new building, the new fire station is going to provide new facilities to help post-fire cleaning for the firefighters for health. Can you elaborate for their health on?
Sure. So one of the big issues that they've been pushing in the fire service in the last 10 years at least is prevention of cancer in the fire service. Now, if I normally carry one of these cards with me, I don't have one with me right now. I've shown it to a few people. I apologize. Firefighters, just by nature, by the profession, occupational hazards in the profession, are 14% more likely to die of cancer than the general public. They are, in some instances, 50% more likely to contract, say, prostate cancer, or testicular cancer, ovarian cancer, melanomas, lung cancers. They are significantly more prone than the general public. So one of the things they've been pushing really hard is prevention of cancer in the fire service. One of the big things is they like to use catchphrases. One is shower within the hour. So you come back from a fire, they want everybody on the shift to have showered within an hour of coming back. Currently in these stations, we have one shower. It's not really feasible for 14 or 15 people to shower within an hour when there's only one shower in the building. The other thing is decontamination of turnout gear. So you come back, they treat apparatus, the fire stations, like a hazardous materials incident. They'll have the hot zone, which is the apparatus floor, warm zone, decontamination area, and the cold zone, which is the living space or the administrative areas. So you come back from a fire in the hot zone, take your turnout gear off, put it in the extractor to wash your turnout gear, go into the shower area, shower and decontaminate, move into the warm zone, put some clean clothes on, and go into the living space. The other thing they do is maintain atmospheric pressure in each one of these different zones, slightly different, imperceptibly different, but different, where it would be 14.7 pounds as atmospheric pressure, so it might be 14.6 on the apparatus floor. They use a little negative pressure. It might be 14.8 in the warm zone and 14.9 in the cold zone. To keep contaminants and carcinogens from entering the living spaces, they use this airlocks and different. You can't just go from the apparatus floor into the living space. You have to go through an airlock to do that, and that's in any modern fire station. It's an OSHA standard. It's as far back as the Revere Parkway station was one of the first ones I had seen like that, and that building's been open for almost 15 years. And no, right now we don't have anything like that. We have a swinging wooden door at the top of the stairs that was put in the late 1880s to prevent carcinogens from getting to the second floor. We capture some diesel exhaust using our Plimo vent system to capture the diesel, but other than that, we don't do anything. And we do have the extractors, we do have for washing our gear and drying our gear, but we're woefully deficient when it comes to the OSHA standards as far as preventing cancer.
Excuse me, Chief, just to clarify.
Sir.
That's certainly within our program for this new future advisory.
It is, absolutely is. Not a want, but a need.
And again, I think from Mr. Masser and Carol too, you understand now the duplication. This is not cheap, but,
Oh, yeah,
so duplication of that is gonna raise that price even higher.
yeah.
One of the things that we go into, it's on the website, when we did a tour of some of the other stations. One of the things they mandate is the proper storage of turnout gear. So now, almost 3 years ago, became an OSHA state in Massachusetts for the fire service. We never were until 2.5 years ago. One of the things they mandate is 2 sets of turnout gear for every firefighter. It has to be less than 10 years old. And you have to store this gear properly. You cannot store it on the apparatus floor because it's exposed to carcinogens. Well, we have nowhere else to keep it, so we do store it on the apparatus floor. We have nowhere else to put it. UV light degrades it. Its exposures and off gases, the chemical. So you're supposed to keep it. In the new fire stations, they have a dedicated, completely isolated turnout gear storage room. Not a want, again, not a want, a need. And that's what they do. It has a completely separate ventilation system, no cross-contamination. It vents directly outside. Multiple air exchanges every day in there. LED lighting so the UV lights don't degrade the turnout gear. The town made a significant $250,000 investment in turnout gear for all of the firefighters. We had to because that was an OSHA mandate, but we don't store that gear properly because we don't have the ability to. Logistically, we can't. Mr. Banks.
Chief, Bobby and I are old friends, so there's no reflection on him. Bob, if you recall, whenever there's a threat of a storm or we have a bad snowstorm, the fire department has always assigned a piece of apparatus to Point Shirley, okay? Those are the 78, we lost one down there, I mean, they had to have a new clutch, but that's how much work they did. But that piece was put down there that night, and they had 3 or 4 EMTs among the crew, just for that, okay? So, I was wondering why we haven't heard more in some of the discussion relative to Point Shirley people. You know, there's a concern, let's face it, the beach section of the town of Winthrop is the fire load you worry about. Look at the paper every day, what's happening in Roxbury and Dorchester, 1 3-decker gets going, and they all go, okay? And that's the problem, but Point Shirley is always concerned about protection, and the department has always seemed to put a piece down there when they need it, okay? So, you know, not like you're left out. So I think
No,
you have
I'm
to.
not talking about during an emergency, during a storm.
Yeah.
I'm just saying under normal circumstances.
Oh, okay, I want to finish up on this. Part of the same program, where they were doing all the new work at Lake Deer Island, okay? And that's over 40 years ago. I was the chief engineer at the time, chief engineer, good title, right? But anyway, the thing is, I called, had the car sent over to me one night, Joe Wilson, some of you fellows know, Larry would know him anyway, retired now. I said, Joe, take me up to engine 56 up to the heights, okay? What do you want to do? He said, I want you to put the lights on, we're gonna park right in front of engine 56, the firehouse up there. Put the lights on, take me to Winthrop, no siren, at a good clip of speed, the truck route, all right? I would cross the bridge, the Scarborough Bridge, down Saratoga Street, down Main Street, down, you know, Shirley Street, the Veterans Road and all, to Deer Island. Took 15 minutes, okay? And of course, Boston in those days was saying, oh, you know, those jerks from Winthrop, what do they know? Well, the jerks from Winthrop, I counted that at another meeting with some people in there, and one of them was the district chief in East Boston, who came out of Ladder 2 up on Sumner Street. And I said, you know, our guys are so well-trained. Every morning when they had that construction going on, as far as the major construction down there, after they get the new shift come on, get their housework done, engine 1 went to Point Shirley. Because the road they were on yesterday wasn't there anymore. They were changing almost daily. And they report back to what was going on down there, okay? And so I went to this meeting in town. David Higginbotham was chief at the time. Marty Pierce was the commissioner. And he had this district chief from East Boston there, and he would happen to be acting deputy that day, not the guy I wanted to talk to, but he was. And I said, didn't you have a second alarm the other day, chief? He said, yeah, over on Bremen Street. I said, you know who covered your ladder too? He said, no, I don't know. I said, it was ladder 17 from the south end. How many times do you think ladder 17 has been to Deer Island without getting lost? They better pack a lunch, you never know where they're gonna go. But I said, you know, they've never been there. My guys are down in the tunnel. Remember they lost 3 or 4 construction people at one time? Didn't have their masks on? My guys were down the tunnel, regular, masks and all. And I said, so, and Marty listened, Marty Pierce, he said, he's right, okay. And so, get off our guys' back. They do a great job, they do what they have to do. As far as the fire station, from the other gentleman's question, the fire, I've been over 40 years since I was running the show up there, if you would, okay? But they were inadequate then, both of them. They were inadequate now. They're 40 years older. One station, built with modern construction materials and techniques and all, heated properly, air conditioned the whole 9, whatever they're doing today, because they're producing very nice buildings today, but they're going to get a lot for your money with one station. And as I say, if our fire department personnel continue to perform like the last 100 years they've been doing around here, with on a shoestring for a budget, things are a little better now, but things were pretty tight. My own father came out to call for us in 1939. He was appointed to a permanent member. He worked 84 hours a week, and he got 40 bucks. And I used to go with him once in a while. I was, you know, kid growing up. When you get your check at the town hall where the superintendent of the school's office, that was a treasurer's office, like a bank. Girl by the name of Vickerson, Joey Vickerson, I'll never forget it. Mine isn't altogether gone yet, but anyway, I remember people, and he checked it, and maybe I get a quarter or a half a dollar from my father.
You check
That
what
was
you
a
can
big
tell
deal.
us.
That was
Did
a
you
big
know what you
deal,
tell us with
okay?
50%?
And so,
I don't know.
these guys worked for peanuts for years, and the town was always a very conservative, Yankee, old line Republican town, you know? We were never broke, but as I said, and they didn't pay the teachers as they should have, didn't pay the fire and police, but those jobs were very well taken by the men. They were glad to have those jobs in many of those days. But as far as the buildings, they're beyond even salvation today. You know, and I favored that right off the bat, and for all the time I was there, but of course, the timing wasn't right. Evidently, Jim thinks the timing is right now. It's absurd. It's absurd. The house I live on Woodside Avenue, I've been there for 56 years. And I paid, well, a lot less now they tell me it's worth over 500,000. Same house, we did a lot of work on it, kept it up, maintained it and all, but it's the same little parcel of land. And as I said, things have changed. Is it a good time to go looking for money? Who knows? Never a good time to look for money. Somebody's always got another use they can use for the money. But as I say, these buildings are inadequate. I think that I've heard it in some of the meetings here, the chief has explained, Larry will tell you, and that the people, you know, the men that work in the buildings now, they're the ones that keep it up so it's livable. To fix the toilets and put in facilities they can live with. Because even now, I saw the original design, the architect's concept, and where they had the men living in the new glassed-in building. Three places the firefighters live, all right? Number one's the rec room, number two is the bedroom, and number three is the kitchen. That's where you're gonna find them. I don't care what they say. There's gonna be meetings, they're gonna be here, they're gonna be there. That's where they're gonna sit, okay? But the thing is that, and I saw when they put the bunk rooms, I said to Jim, forget it. And fortunately, a town manager, his father was on the fire department. He came out of ladder 23 in Grove Hall. They have a lot of fires out there, okay? So he understands. He said, we're gonna change that, where the men are gonna sleep alone. But the thing is, it's big changes. The whole job has changed today. Years ago, even with the hours, the police, I had a friend of mine, retired Boston police officer, he said his patrolman married late in life, okay? And the captain of every police precinct was in charge. He was God, okay? He went in, he got married. And he said to the captain, I'd like to come off nights. He worked his whole career on the night shift. And the captain said, why? He said, well, I'm married, my new wife doesn't like being home alone at night. He said, buy her a dog. Denied. And he got denied. Can you imagine that? And that was the way it was. God, they were God, all right? And Boston fire captains were no bargain either at times. But as I say, so it's a different job today. And you gotta provide the right facilities because they're living, I'm not gonna say in squalor because if it wasn't for them doing all the work, they'd be just, they might as well put a bunk out in the backyard sometimes because it's certainly needed and has been needed for a long time. And I'm glad to see that somebody's making a move. Maybe the people won't agree on the price of living. I don't know how. My wife and I brought up 5 kids, all right? And I don't know how people bring up families today with the cost that you see every day. And I have one of my daughters is my principal caregiver. She lives around the corner. And, you know, I give her money every week to go to the store. I don't complain, whatever she takes the money. But, you know, all she's buying is for she and I. But the thing is, it's a whole different ballgame. And today, I went to Boston College. I graduated in 1952 with a degree in business administration. The tuition at Boston College in 1952 was $100 a quarter, $400 a year. Of course, it was staffed primarily by Jesuit priests, as you know. And now we have the business school constructed, and now they've got these, you know, higher laymen and all, because of course, can you imagine? These fees are like $89,000. How do you educate a child today? I mean, they have dorms. They didn't have any dorms in those days. We rode the old clunkers from Shirley, but you know what, she ran all the time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bennett.
So maybe I took a lot of your time.
Thank you, that's quite all right. Ma'am, you wanted to have
Well,
something
I
to
was
say.
gonna say, I think, I've been part of this, debate, I guess, for a little while. It seems like no one's against having the good stuff. It seems like there's a, friction about where it will go. So I think we all echo your sentiments that like, should have the good stuff that is needed to fit in with OSHA and the new stipulations and everything, but the real sort of turmoil is about where it will go. Am I understanding that, right? I think
Well,
everybody
okay.
wants to have the stuff you need, and everybody loves that there's fire.
Why, there used to be a hose house, by the way, in Point Shirley, all right?
I wanna hear about that later.
Anybody else like to be heard? Sir?
I'm Mark Chapdelaine, Precinct 2. I got a question regarding, I saw this at the beginning of the planning, regarding EMS coming out of the new firehouse. Would that be part of phase 1, phase 2? I understand there could be a financial benefit to the town, and if so, how much is expected and where would that money go to? Would that money be used to defray the cost to the taxpayer on an annual basis or otherwise?
This was a long-term goal of the town manager. He did this in the prior community that he worked in. Right now, we use a private ambulance company to handle both BLS and ALS, so basic life support, EMTs, and ALS paramedics, both run by Action Ambulance. If this project is successful, one of the goals is to add a bay, a double piggyback bay, and have the fire department run BLS ambulance service, at least in the short term, backed up by ALS from Action Ambulance. I don't have the figures on it, this is more of the town manager's purview, but it is a significant amount of money, a revenue source for the community, for the town, on the BLS transport side. We do, off the top of my head, 2,500 transports a year out of Winthrop to Boston hospitals, which would be primarily 50% of them anyways would be BLS and would be staffed by firefighters from the town. So there would be a initial cost outlay. We would have to buy ambulances. We would also have to increase the staffing of the fire department. But he's of the mindset that that is a worthy goal for the department to strive for.
Can I follow up a little bit on that? Just because back in the 90s, I looked at that same concept when I was chief of department. And even back in the 90s, the town could have made money. And I tried to sell it to the town, and we almost got it through. It didn't quite want to go, but we almost got it through because the town can make money with an ambulance. The income from transports and medical procedures and ambulance, if everybody's taking an ambulance, you know these days it's like huge money to take an ambulance. But the cost of buying the ambulances and staffing them and everything else is covered, and the town still makes a profit if you run a BLS. That's why a lot of fire departments now are going to doing exactly that, if not advanced. Some departments are running advanced life support ambulances. Cambridge does, I believe.
They do.
But yeah, the town can make some money at it and help defray operating costs for the rest of the fire department or whatever else they want to use that excess.
Lynn did it 20 years ago, and they're making money, and they don't even have, high-end recovery on the insurance, and they're still
Right,
making
they're
money.
still making money, yeah.
So, just to be clear, right now, those costs go to a private company.
Correct.
Correct.
Right.
But also, I see the fire department going up by my house, I don't know how many times a week, going over to the arbors.
Still-
Because they have to go over there, because if somebody falls, I guess it's a state law, that the people that work there cannot pick somebody up. They have to call 911. And again, I don't know how many times that fire engine goes by my house, over there. So, and that, we get nothing, I don't believe there's any reimbursement for that.
There is not.
So,
The town manager stated that the anticipated revenue, net revenue, would be between $200,000 and $300,000 if it worked out. And there is a huge benefit too, for the firefighters to be able to leave the station with the ambulance also, to be able to go over the situation before they get there.
The other positive is if you have a fire, you have a couple or more firefighters that you wouldn't have had also. And then the private would cover, or mutual aid would cover the ambulance too. And that's a big plus too, because we don't go out with too many
Because
firefighters.
they're firefighters as well as paramedic, or EMTs.
And additionally, again, one little thing is occasionally you'll get a medical call that they need an extra person in the back of the ambulance. Well, one of the firefighters goes and they go into Boston. So now we're down a firefighter from a small group to even smaller group. So if you're running it yourself, you have extra personnel, you're not gonna run into that problem of short staffing yourself because somebody had to go into Boston with the ambulance.
Any other
I
questions or
ask another
comments?
one?
Of course.
Realizing now that you need all this room, why did you shoot down, if you thought about it, taking what was the old middle school area? I know now you wanna put a recreation center, but, I mean.
Going back, the council president can address that, but going back several town councils, several iterations of the town council, 3 different town managers, it was always earmarked for economic redevelopment for the town. It was never meant, it was never considered, while it was at one point scored and looked at, it was not. It was always earmarked for economic redevelopment for the community. And Mr.
that
Council President,
The town is gonna make money off of, is that
Yes.
what you're saying?
yes.
Well, the town and businesses, right, is a economic stimulus for businesses in the town and a revenue stream for the town as a whole. But to get back to your point on the space, right, because you said if it's so big.
You've got
if-
plenty of room there.
Oh, you got almost double the room. If you look at the Kirby's, the Wadsworth Building, and the current police station, it's roughly 51,000 square feet. If you look at the old middle school site, excluding the rink, it's 91,000 square feet.
At least.
So you have an abundance of room, almost too much room, because what do you do with the rest of the space? Do you get any economic stimulus out of that? Obviously, the cost of the project, we think would be higher. Now, the big plus is you're not buying anything, right, because you already own it, so you're saving money there. The cost of demolition is double maybe what the cost of demolition is here, but that's relatively small. But you'd have to go through Article 97 for the in terms of its parkland, right? It was donated parkland way back, so it's not something that can't be done. You have to go through the State House. It's a process, it takes a little bit of time. You'd also have to go through, one of the big pluses with our police station is the fact that they have a firing range underneath, underground, undergrade. And that's a big plus. And in phase 2, we want to expand that a little bit, make it a little bit bigger, but they still have it there. The cost of putting you would never obviously put a firing range on the first floor or second floor of a building. It would be underground. The cost of doing that, we're told, would be exorbitant. Not that it can't be done.
Fire and police.
Well,
At the
like
same
you were saying,
location.
if you were gonna, the space is the whole thing, right? If you're gonna, I don't think we would ever as a town even consider just building a fire station at the middle school. It's just so
Why
much
not?
space. Because I think the goal is to have a public safety building, and the thought is, although the fire station's, one built in 1884, the other one in 1905, whatever the date was, the police station was built in 1930, right? And it was remodeled in 92. Their major problem at the police station, I'm sure there's a few, but their major issue is space. They need more space. So that's why we looked at this as a possible connection. So you could build a phase 1, so it's more economically palatable for residents, right? Because the economy isn't great right now, interest rates are high, so people struggle, and we thought it's a little more economically, a little better appetite for people to go in a phased approach, right? And if you go into a phase 2 approach for the police station, now we're thinking by the time that hits the tax rolls, because this doesn't hit the tax rolls. If you built the fire station next year, it doesn't hit the tax rolls completely until fiscal '27. So again, if you used a phase 2 approach, by the time the phase 2 with the police station would hit the tax rolls, the middle high school would be coming off. So, we're really trying to look at it to be financially palatable for people, so they don't get a huge hit all at once. But the space, personally, I think it's too much space. I think, like you say, it's an abundance of space, definitely plenty of it, but almost too much, and doesn't bring any economic stimulus to the town. Now, and again, people will say, we're spending money for the buildings, for the acquisition cost, and you save that, but still, overall, if these costs go up 8 to 10% a year, and you're looking now 3 years down the road to start this project, and if it's 40 now, and then you're adding a police station is, say, just double is 80, now you're looking at 100, 110, which
Oh,
is.
yeah, it's gonna go up, no matter what.
Yeah, we know it's not going down, we know that.
Realistically, that $40 million number is not 100% accurate. I mean,
I think it's pretty accurate, but I was just looking, because somebody brought up, I forget who brought up Cambridge, because I've heard it at a couple of different meetings, right? How Cambridge is doing all this stuff. There was an article in today's Cambridge Day, October 23rd, and they talked about fire headquarters. They talked about how there's 8 fire stations in Cambridge. And fire headquarters, they're in the midst of remodeling. Now, they started in 2018 with $3 million just to get the ball rolling. And then a couple of years back, they said the cost of the project was gonna be $28 million. And now today, they're saying it's up to $37 million. So, and the fact that they're doing some remodels cheaply, I've also heard at past council meetings, and I think it might have been former Chief Flanagan that said that there were bathrooms remodeled for over $2.5 million each station, just for the bathroom. So it's not that they're bringing everything up to date, I think they've done it on an ongoing basis. And they're saying that their main station is decrepit because it was built in the 30s. Most of these stations, as Chief Wiley said earlier, were built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and they're saying those have to be done over. We're looking at 140 years and
no, I
115
don't
years.
think anybody
And I know you're not
can dispute
describing,
the need.
it's just a.
The need
right.
is definitely there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no
It's
question
the site.
about that.
It goes back to the question in the back about the location. And, you know,
But
we'll,
does that give you an open book, the way the question's written now? Is that what you're saying? If you need more money,
oh, no, no, if this was,
the money the town has voted.
if it was more money that required a debt exclusion, if it went over, you know, $1 million, let's say, and let's say the cost of $1 million is $100,000 a year, or $10,000, $50,000 a year. If that could be absorbed within the town operating budget, it would not. But if it was like it went from 40 to 50, yeah, we would have to go back and get another debt exclusion.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
And again, the costs are assuming that this project is started next year. It's not like the cost in 2023. You know, that, and we've discussed this, but if this was to pass in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks from
2
tomorrow.
weeks from tomorrow.
You know, the acquisition would probably take place in January or early February. The businesses would have ample time. By law, they would have 4 months from the closing, but we would give them the time they needed. We don't anticipate doing anything structurally or destructionally until late summer, early fall of next year. And then they've told us from that date, it would be 12 to 16 months before it was done. And the other big plus about this, which would be on different sites too, is the fact that we're not relocating. And Cambridge talked about relocation costs and how it cost them $3 million just to get special units to come in to act as a temporary headquarters, which is a huge plus for us that we're not going to have to do that. So yeah, so we've discussed the number of locations, and Cambridge said they looked at 40 locations. We've looked at a dozen, pretty much, between 10 and 12. And for various factors, whether it be space, whether it be flood zone issues, whether it be location, a lot of it mostly is size of the locations, but it's kind of crazy when you think of some of the locations that have been looked at. You know, the basketball courts on Walden Street were looked at, not enough space, not enough frontage. The old Muffin Town was looked at, Expert Auto was looked at, the A Field was looked at, the 7th hole of the golf course was looked at, the existing fire stations were looked at. You know, middle school was looked at. So there have been a lot of locations, but this, you know, to have a so-called friendly taking where owners are willing and wanting to sell, and the location being right next to the police station, I understand it's hard for a lot of people just to grasp it and look at it, and a lot of people look at that Wadsworth building and just think of that as being a fire station, and that's not the case. It's gonna be set back 100 feet off the sidewalk. But to look at the time and effort that's been put into it, and the hours of thought, and to get the experts to talk about turn radiuses and such, because that was a big thing at the beginning. There's no way a piece of apparatus would be able to turn. They're gonna be well able to turn, and they're gonna be, again, sitting on the property outside the buildings before they even get on the sidewalk. So, there has been a lot of work put into it, and, again, I just encourage people, and I think this is great, the last few meetings, we've had more and more people, which is fantastic to get different questions out there. You just want people to understand the correct information.
Chief, I believe a gentleman down there had a question.
Yes, sir.
So, I'm Nicholas, I'm on precinct five, nice to meet you all.
Last name, Nicholas, please, for the
Loud,
record?
Loud,
Nicholas Loud?
yeah.
Thank you.
So, the middle school, I know it's been beating a dead horse. If there was no regulation on what you could build there, would that still be a number one spot that you would possibly have a fire station and combination police station? Because right now, that's not affecting the town by, well, not kicking businesses out. If you talk about economic development, you're kicking people out, and you have to move them, and you're paying them to move or whatnot. This is land that the town already owns. We don't own this, we don't have to buy it, it's already there. To me, that's more of an economic stimulus to the town than versus having businesses being kicked out and having those real estate potential being destroyed. Whether those could be, if somebody wants to buy the Kirby house or whatnot and develop their own thing, or the building itself and develop its own thing. You're taking that retail space out and you're putting something that uses taxes, well, not making taxes back. So,
So, again, the Wadsworth building, if this didn't pass,
Yeah.
let's say November 7th, November 8th, potentially, right? It could be sold and it could be torn down November 9th. And if the town isn't buying it, that's it, the tenants are out and they're done, and, that's not a scare tactic, that's just reality of anybody, right? It's a business, it's not there's been a lot of talk about it being a historic building. It's a beautiful old building. It's not officially a historic building. It's in a historic district. So that building could be sold to anyone and could be torn down without
exactly.
anybody doing
But I'm
anything.
saying, now you're taking, if they do tear it down, I may be fond of the building, but maybe somebody else is not. They wanna build their own thing, have retail spaces on the front floor, have condos and whatnot at the top. I'd rather have that, because it's giving more revenue to the town versus something that's gonna be using revenue from the town,
Josh?
I would like to actually help answer the question by asking the president 3 questions. Currently, the Wadsworth Building and the Kirby House, how much tax revenue does it bring in?
$28,000 a year, the two pieces
The
of property.
potential sports complex, how much revenue could it potentially bring in?
$200,000
A year?
a year.
Yeah.
But there are, to get back to the point on, we're not throwing anybody out.
I
We're
understand
going,
that.
and we, as, not because it's a moral obligation, again, legal obligation, we want to, obviously, it only behooves Winthrop to keep all these businesses here. And I think we've done that with almost all of them already. So I anticipate them all staying in town, and being, in most cases, in better situations. But there is a cost, right, to do that, which is part of the project, which was known from the beginning. We never wanted to displace any businesses. We're a small town. We don't have any, we have, what do we have, 2 national chains in town? We have Dunkin' Donuts, we have CVS, and that's what we have. And when we got the second Dunkin' Donuts, it was like a big deal. We don't have a lot of chains. We're not able to even have a different tax classification because we just don't have any businesses. We have less than 6% commercial businesses in town for revenue. So, we rely on you guys, right, on the citizens to pay their real estate taxes. That's how we survive, basically. So we would never want to diminish any of that. Part of the, another thing that the town council, one of the original councils put in was an additional, basically a town meals tax, right? So we have an additional 3/4 of a basis point or 3/4% in a tax. So if you're going out for dinner and if it's $50, or I guess now if it's $75 or whatever it is, it's an extra $1.50 going in, that comes back to the town. The town, when it first started, was getting about $75,000, $80,000 a year in income, which is great, right? Now, it's about $200,000, and if you do that reverse math, divide 200,000 by 3/4 of a basis point, it's over $20 million that's spent in local small businesses in town. The meat market's one of the biggest ones, right? You would never wanna lose that because that provides some sort of revenue there, and I think, you know, the meat market has come out and they're supporting the project, and they think they're gonna be in a better place after, and I agree with that, but you don't, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, you don't wanna lose businesses, and we absolutely don't wanna do that. But we have thought, and, you know, people will say, it's been 7 years, if it's so important to have revenue in there, why haven't we done something in 7 years? That's a really good question, and I'd like an answer to that too. There's been different thoughts, different possibilities, some of them in hindsight, I'm glad we didn't do. You know, I think when you're looking at additional, you know, we're going to have small incremental development in this town. That's just the way things happen, right? There's a new center zoning that you're gonna see apartments going on top of businesses and stuff, and you could absorb those 10 and 15 and 20 units. I don't think this town can absorb 150 units at once, you know, for the effect on the school system and the effect on taxes, net taxes, right? You might get revenue in, but if it's costing you double to have that revenue, it's not really good revenue.
So the development of the police station too, have you thought about a vague number, how much that's gonna cost?
We don't have a number yet, we're assuming it's gonna be, again, it depends on when it's built, right? We go back to the cost of money, and if you built it, in 5 or 6 years, you're probably talking, you know, $40 or $50 million. And that's why when I thought of the timing, the cost of the middle high school was $81 million. So we bonded as a town $41.5 million. So my thought is, if you get it to about that cost or a little more, and if they hit at the same time, it's a net zero almost to the taxpayer, and that's what we're really trying to look at.
So a combination police and fire station and development together, you know, to me, that sounds more feasible because, like you said, construction cost is going up, material cost is going up, labor cost is going up. So I think doing it all together at once is more economical feasible because it's being developed at the same time. So you can get the numbers, you can understand where the project is going versus, 5 years down the line, we need a new police station. Now, 5 times his cost has gone up. So-
No, I think if you're looking at 5 years down the road, you could potentially be at 40% higher,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the issue is you're putting an incredible burden on taxpayers now, with interest rates at 7.5, approaching 8%. Now you're putting an $80 or $90 million project on the burden of the taxpayers with no other, other than the few that I've mentioned coming off the tax rolls, the ATC and the Miller Field, but you don't have another big debt exclusion coming off to offset that, so you're looking at over $1,000 a year. That's a lot of money for residents. We have an older population, and I could say older because I'm one of them now, but you know, we have relatively an older population, and to put that kind of a burden on them all at once, I think is too much to handle. But just an opinion, my opinion.
Yeah.
So with the $40 million debt exclusion, the cost of the average home is $456.25 a year. It would be roughly double that, or $900 to $1,000 for the average homeowner for an $80 million debt exclusion. That's an awfully big pill to swallow.
But this is also land that that the town already owns.
Well, it wouldn't matter where you built it. It would be $80 million to build a combination, maybe more. It'd be $80 to $90 million to build a combination public safety building. Is there any other comment in the room? Sir?
I do. Scott Mahoney Wright, Precinct 3. So all the social media jargon going around about this project, a lot of it misinformation and some accurate information. One of the questions my neighbor asked me this morning, he said, so I'm hearing if we go forward with the project and we move the tenants out of the Wadsworth building, there's a cost associated with that, right? I said, yeah. I said, well, what are we paying for that? I said, I don't know. So that's kind of one of those layered issues where people say, okay, so if the town takes the building by eminent domain, we go forward with the project, what are we spending? What's being spent to relocate those tenants? How much are we spending? And what's the obligation around that, and for how long? To me, those are valid questions, only because if you know the cost is coming back to you at some point as a taxpayer, you want to know how long you're going to be paying that for. Just like with a bond, how long we'd be paying out on that for construction of the project, when it's eventually going to come off the roll. So if we moved all those tenants locally in Winthrop, so they all had a place to stay and keep their businesses, the church, everything. What are we paying for that? And that's what I see a lot on social media. People are saying things like, well, how much are we gonna spend for that? What's that gonna cost? Because we're hearing what the overall project is estimated at. So we kinda have an idea of that, but the layers below that, those are the questions I'm just pointing out, those are the questions I'm seeing from people. And I don't know, my gut feeling is people are not presenting those questions to you. They're talking amongst themselves, but they're not sharing. I've asked so many people, have you submitted questions to the council, to the committee? Have you called Jim Lettieri? No. They're obviously not here. And when you provide the Zoom option, and nobody's on Zoom, what does that tell you? They're not asking the right people the right questions to get the answers to this process. And I'm sure it's frustrating. As a resident, it's incredibly frustrating, because I keep seeing all these conversations that make no sense at all. But I think when you buy a car, you look at the sticker price, and you see all those associated costs broken down for you. It's the same thing when you buy a house. You know what your taxes are gonna be, what your down payment is, all those fees, all those costs. If there was some sort of document, I know you can't name off, right off the top of your head, how much we're gonna spend, but if we say, okay, we move these tenants out, and we find places for them, we're gonna contribute, the town's gonna contribute to leases for 12 months, or 6 months, or we're gonna pay their moving costs, or say in the case of the meat market, moving their equipment, if there's any build-out costs to where they're going to be. If I know, yeah, we're gonna contribute to that, I'm okay with that, I'm fine with that. It's not a problem for me. But a lot of people not kind of seeing something broken down beyond what the overall project is costing or will cost, for some people that seems to be a problem. I just wanna point that out.
Yeah, and go back, I don't know when it was, 2004 or 5, the town tried to do an override, right? Tried to do a $6 million override and just said, we want a $6 million override, right? Didn't say anything else, and it failed miserably. And a couple of years later, they came back and said, we want an override, and we're gonna do a menu item, and said, okay, we want $175,000 for the senior center, we want $200,000 for the library, we want this for the police, this for the schools, this for, and there was, I believe, 9 questions, and 8 out of the 9 passed. So, going back to your point about, more definition, more clarity, people wanna see where the money going. It is an inclusive right, it's not over the 40 million, but you wanna know what piece of it goes here and there, and we will have a piece out on the website within the next week with a more detail, not exact numbers, but when you're looking at relocation costs, we're not paying rent for 6 months, because they're paying rent anyway, it's not an additional cost, but we would be relocating. Some businesses just literally have an office and a chair, that it might cost $5,000 to move them or whatever. Some might cost $50,000 to move them, but some of these costs will be absorbed in the acquisition cost. So it could, we have a number in the budget, like you're saying, that maybe we could be more clear with and have it more articulated better. But if the number is $100,000, and if it comes in at 175, then that would be offset in the acquisition cost of the property. So we're not gonna go over the number that we wanna be at. We've looked at all the rents, what they're collecting for rents, each business. We've looked at each business in terms of, obviously the meat market's the biggest in terms of trying to move all that equipment and such, and just, potential build-out costs for them, which might be on their shoulder, and they might be happy with that, but, and the other one is the church, just in terms of space, right? It's not really moving chairs or pews or whatever, it's more the space. But we have looked into that, we literally have either locations in mind, or they have arrangements already made for, well over 50% of them, and closer to probably 75 or 80%. But I think it is important that we have a more detailed number for costs. I mean, people say 40 million. Today on social media, I heard all of a sudden it went to 42. I don't know where that came from, but it's between 35 and 40 is what we've said since day one, and we feel really confident in that. There were things when the middle high school was built, and it was 80, and we got to the point where it was just like, uh-oh, if we do this, it's gonna go higher, and we said, okay, well, we're gonna have to cut back on something, and we did, to stay within, I think we were actually under budget a little bit in the high school, which is,
$1.5 million.
fortunately or unfortunately, how we ended up with the tennis courts, because which is great that the town has beautiful new tennis courts here, but that's because the previous CFO kind of overbonded before, and that's why you bond in tranches, you don't borrow it all at once, so you don't see the effect in the first year, because you don't want to borrow more than you need. Because if we say it's a $40 million project, and we go out in January and borrow $40 million, and now we're sitting in that money at whatever the interest rate is now, and if we only end up spending 38, now you can't give that money back to the taxpayers. You can only do certain things with it. And so that kind of stinks, right? So you borrow in tranches, so you're only borrowing what you need. And hopefully, as the world changes and everything else, the thought is everything's cyclical, interest rates will hopefully come back down now, which over the next couple of years might help us in the cost of the project, so. But it is important, and we will have a more detailed breakdown of, where that 40 million-ish, 38 million comes from. Thank you,
I
Scott.
think that's another point too, is that a lot of people don't seem to understand that if the project doesn't go through, those building owners can sell to whoever they want. And if they go and construct, let's say the Winthrop building, somebody buys it from the present owner, says, I'm gonna put residential there. It's all gonna be residential, no commercial.
Well, that is part, and I will
They
say
only have to
that
have
that is part of the center business district, so it couldn't be all residential without some sort of, you could go to the planning board of appeals and have it changed, but it would have to have some component of, if you bought it.
But maybe not at the same level.
No, doesn't have to be the same level. If you look at Somerset, there's one commercial property on that first floor, so there are definitely accommodations made.
Fall into that,
Yeah.
that people aren't taking into account.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, there's a lot of unknowns if somebody else was to buy that, and if it was residential units, depending on the size of the units, the type of units, apartments versus condos, there's a huge dependency on taxes, if it's apartments or condos, and then the effect on the school system and traffic and such.
Any other comment in the room?
Thank you very much for your time.
Hannah, is there anybody on Zoom?
There's a couple people on Zoom, but no comments.
No raised hands?
Nope.
Okay.
Peter keeps coming back because he wants to fight with Scott about.
Mr.
perfect
Banks, do you want
attendance.
something else?
I just want to compliment the president of the council. When he announced the committee, and I said, you're never gonna get that many people to get together. You got them all together tonight, didn't you? And I have to tip my hat to you.
and even you came.
And even I came, yeah. That may be a loss, Peter.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no other comment, we're gonna close the public hearing.
Thank you.
All right, close the public hearing session. I just wanted to bring a couple of items up, just for housekeeping, I guess. We had open houses at the fire station last Saturday. We had a very good turnout.
Oh, good.
It was very positive, very good turnout. Thank all the people that showed up. We have a couple of coffee hours coming up. It's not too late. If you'd like us to come to talk to you in person, friends, neighbors, whatever, please reach out through the website, winthropfirestation.com. We have one scheduled tomorrow. Karen and I are going to. I have another one coming up at Seal Harbor 3 with Council President on Wednesday night. We're happy to come to you and we'll answer questions. Sometimes people are more comfortable in their own surroundings. There are several yard signs up around town. Yard signs went out the other night. There are still some available. If you would like one or know anybody who would like one, reach out and we'll make sure that we get one to you.
We'll make sure we get it to the yes committee. have them
To the
put it out.
committee. Anybody on the committee, on the have anything they'd like to add?
No, I guess I just want to remind everybody that the election is 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Thanks.
Very much. Yeah, good to see you.
The election is 2 weeks from tomorrow. And everybody on the committee, I think it's time to start calling our family, our friends, and our neighbors to encourage them to get out to vote.
All right, well said. With that, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Second.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Belcher. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned at 19:04.
Are we going